starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to this webinar about using PharmaPendium and Embase for your drug safety solution. My name's Anne-Marie and I'm your host today. I'm here with our product specialist Pooja Yan. Pooja, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining the webinar today. My name is Pooja Jain and I have about 10 years of research experience stemming from academia and pharma. I have a master's in molecular biology, and then I also have an MBA from Boston College. So thank you all for joining today's call. I look forward to presenting the webinar to you.
And thank you for joining as well, Pooja. We will be placing this webinar online so you can listen to it again in your own time. Before we get started, we'd like to briefly put the two products we're going to talk about today, PharmaPendium and Embase, into context with the other activities that go on at Elsevier. Elsevier serves three main and interlinked areas which may be of interest to you: biology, chemistry and medicine. PharmaPendium gives you searchable access to all FDA and EMA approval documentation. Embase is one of the products serving your needs in biochemistry, and Pooja will go into these in a little bit more detail throughout the webinar. And we also have Reaccess, our tool for chemists, and our new target finding and validation tool, Target Insights, along with Pathway Studio within the biology and medicine spheres. Cyber Science Direct provides full-text access to over 10 million journal articles and enables further understanding of the scientific literature through applications and new article formats, as does Cyber Scopus, a multidisciplinary all-science abstract and citation database. So this should help to put our solutions into context. And just before we get started and hand over to Pooja, a couple of need-to-knows. During the session, you may send us your questions by using the question function on your webinar control panel. We will have some questions throughout the webinar, and we'll also make time for a Q&A at the end of the webinar. So please do send us your questions. It's an ideal opportunity to have your questions answered in the webinar. For those questions we don't get to in the 45 minutes time slot, we will complete those questions and send you a complete Q&A at the end of the webinar. If you wish to have a full screen view, please click on the red arrow. Your control panel will be hidden, and click again to see your control panel. So, Pooja, could you please tell us about how Embase and PharmaPendium, working together, provide a comprehensive drug safety solution?
Sure. Thank you so much, Amo, for that introduction. So what I'm going to do is basically just go over Embase and PharmaPendium very briefly, and then we'll get started into some nice examples which would be relevant for your workflows. So Embase is an online information source of biomedical literature that serves pharmacovigilance reporting needs by broadly tracking adverse events from comprehensive, high-quality sources. Embase records are deeply indexed using our M-Tree thesaurus to make searching faster, more accurate, and more specific. M-Tree lists more than 60,000 preferred terms and over 260,000 synonyms, including generic and trade names of drugs. And compared to Medline, Embase has over 2,000 more journals in addition to conference reports. In total, Embase indexes over 7,000 journals. Now for PharmaPendium, PharmaPendium is the only online resource to allow drug development teams to efficiently extract best-in-class drug development information, all available FDA approval since 1938, and European drug approval since 1995, and more. We have more than 1.5 million pages of drug reviews, more than 4,000 drugs covered, and we offer comparative exposure data and regulatory precedents. So now let's see how these two products can work together to help for your drug safety needs. So in order to show the depth and breadth of information, we will choose a drug that was approved in 1995. It's an anti-diabetic drug, just so we can show you examples of how much information you can access when having both PharmaPendium and Embase together, as there is a lot of rich data that we can extract out. Now, I'm going to walk you through the quote-unquote agenda of the presentation, and we'll go through a workflow throughout the presentation to show you what kind of examples you're going to see within the next 45 minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to start in Embase and we're going to do a drug search of our carbos. We're going to filter that search by adverse event, and then we're going to filter it by liver toxicity. We have chosen liver toxicity mainly because it's one of the biggest reasons why drugs fail in clinical trials. And then from there, we're going to look at our search query and identify relevant articles that may be of interest to us. And in particular, we're going to look at articles which identify any warning signs that there may be drug-induced liver toxicity, and that will be from Embase. And then we're going to go into PharmaPendium, as represented by the light orange box, and we're going to ask, was there any evidence of this adverse event or of this warning sign before the drug was approved? We're going to find reports of post-marketing adverse events, and then we're going to go into PharmaPendium and ask, can we find evidence of these adverse events at the preclinical and clinical stages before drug approval? We're going to look at adverse events which were not reported in the labeling. And then we're going to ask, could we have known about these adverse events before the label was updated using the FDA approval packages? And last, we're going to go through Embase and see adverse events reported to affect patient compliance. And then we're going to go into PharmaPendium and ask, did we actually find evidence of this in the approval package? And how do we mitigate risk moving forward? So before I proceed, I would just mention that I'm showing here some smaller screenshots, but then I will show a full screen view so you can see what the results look like a bit better. The purpose of the smaller screenshots is to help you visualize how to initially navigate Embase. So here you will see what Embase looks like when we go onto the home page. Now, due to time limits, I'm not going to go into all of the functionalities of Embase. You will be prompted to fill out a short survey at the end of this webinar. By filling out your information, we will have the opportunity to contact you about the products that you indicate you are interested in learning more about, and then we can really show you a more in-depth product demo at another time. With that said, you will still be able to follow along, as I have made sure you can get a good grasp of how the products can help you answer some key questions you have pertaining to drug safety. Therefore, we are going to largely focus on the specific functionalities and features that pertain to the examples that we will demonstrate. So again, here you see the home page of Embase. Now to find information related to our carbo specifically, we can click on the tab named Drug to get more relevant searches, as you can see over here. And then we can actually choose from a number of drug subheadings that can lead us to information that is more relevant to an end user. For the example we will show you today, we will first do a search with just the drug name or carbos alone, and then we will later show you the results we get when we choose adverse drug reaction as a subheading, since our examples are focused on drug safety. Here we have a screenshot of a search that was performed with just our carbos alone. We can see we get almost 5,000 results. Now, just to show you how much information you would have missed if you relied on PubMed alone, if you do a simple carbo search in PubMed, you get less than 1/3 of the results. This is largely due to the fact that PubMed does not do full text searching. So a lot of the data that you can find in the body of the article, you will miss out on. Hence, if the words that you are searching for are not in the title, abstract, or keyword list, you lose a lot. And this is a huge risk to take if you're working in drug safety. So let's start off by doing the following search query in Embase. And as we go along, we will be pointing out some articles that you would have missed if you relied on just PubMed alone. So let's look at now a larger full screen view of just the carbo search. You will see your search query displayed over here at the top in the red box whenever you do a search in Embase. And then you will see your query list listed over here. And then you will see additional filter options which you can use to further filter your results down. And I will talk about these filters a bit more on the next slide. Now, since your search results are so large, almost 5,000 results, one thing we can do, which we mentioned earlier, is to filter based on adverse drug reactions from the drug tab we showed earlier. So on the next slide, you will see how we can narrow down the search results even further by filtering records on adverse drug reaction. Now, we have gone from almost 5,000 records to now almost 1,000. On the left-hand side, I have an expanded view of one of the filters, disease. Here you will see the top 25 terms listed with the highest frequency from my search query. To narrow down the results even further, we can look at liver toxicity, since liver toxicity is one of the main reasons why drugs fail. Now when we select for liver toxicity and filter our results down even further, we end up with just 194 results. We have a highly relevant set of records now, and we can go in and see what kind of insights we can find. And all of this literally just took a few minutes. So it saves end users a lot of time. We will be referring to this result set very often during the presentation, since we will be pulling a lot of interesting articles from the search query. By looking at our results, one article that may pop out is the one that mentions elevated transaminase levels in the title. If we look at the abstract, we can see that our carbose is nowhere to be found in the abstract. Hence, this article would have definitely been missed instead. Transaminase levels are often associated with some kind of indication for a liver disorder. So knowing what is present helpful. Just to be sure that our carbose is relevant, it's a relevant topic for this article, look at the Index Terms tab. You can see terms which are present in the full text. Carbose is indeed listed here. Hence, you can see that it is a relevant article. So we are now looking at PharmaPendium, in which we can find transaminase. Here you will see the home page of PharmaPendium. And what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a search that will search records containing the word transaminase, and we can restrict that search to just labels to see what drugs actually had data related to transaminase on the FDA labels themselves. And we can do this by going to the Advanced Search tab, typing in transaminase here with at least one of the words present in the search, and restricting it to a label search. Here, we can see that we actually get over 1,500 results. You can now actually compare information from different drugs to see what kinds of elevated transaminase levels were found. And the different drugs are actually listed here. This kind of comparative drug view is only visible in PharmaPendium. And this is a huge value driver for end users. To be able to compare data amongst drugs which are targeting the same indication or which belong to the same class is really big. To narrow the results further, we can click on the Show Filter tab. So by clicking on the Show Filter tab, we'll get to options which will allow us to further narrow our results. So we can see that we can select drugs and drug classes to narrow down our results. So here, we can select anti-diabetic agents, and then find our carbose and see if there's any mention of transaminase in its labels. All we have to do is select our carbose, and then click on the Apply Filters tab. So here, we can see the 4 results. Now, if you look at the lines closely, it looks like it is the same results mentioned 4 times. But in fact, the results pertain to different labels, which can be really useful because you may want to know how has the data changed since the drug was approved. To give you an example of how easy it is to go from here into PharmaPendium and find the data, simply click on the link which is at the top of each result. So in this case, we will click on the first result over here and get right into the label. And here's an example of the page that we will land on, which talks about the transaminase levels for our carbos. And again, here you can get some really deep insights into the data, something that's very hard to do with any other product out there. Another thing to note is that in PharmaPendium, none of the content is altered at all. It is the original content, so you can be rest assured that you are getting all of the correct information. Keeping everything in its original form was actually a requirement from the FDA. So, in summary, we were able to link critical post-marketing findings to the drug and validate its relevance in the context of the studies that were performed as part of the drug approval process. We were able to look at post-marketing findings and understand how they could be relevant across different drugs and drug classes. And then we could even get directly to the study that was done and now find ways in which study designs could be optimized to reduce the chance of seeing those same events take place with a drug that maybe you are currently developing. So now let's look at our second example. So we're going to look at reports of post-marketing adverse events, and we're going to ask, can we find evidence of these adverse events at the preclinical and clinical stages before drug approval? Now let's go back again to this result page where we had searched our carbos and then filtered by adverse drug reaction and liver toxicity. If we scroll down the results, we will come to this result, number 13, where the title is called Hepatotoxicity and Hepatic Metabolism of Available Drugs, Current Problems and Possible Solutions in Preclinical Stages, which looks like a really interesting article since it talks about drugs linked to having fatal hepatotoxicity. Now, from the abstract and title alone, it is not completely clear if this article is directly relevant to our carbos. However, like we previously showed, if you click on the index tabs, we can see a carbos is mentioned in the drug index terms. Hence, it is an article that can be of relevance to the particular end user. So remember our scenario again, that we are interested in finding post-marketing information on adverse events related to liver toxicity for our carbos. This article would not have been picked up by PubMed. Hence, critical information would have been lost during our pharmacovigilance monitoring. Now, we don't have a subscription to this article, but here is another article called Prediction of Severe Adverse Drug Reactions Using Pharmacokinetic Biomarkers, which also looks really interesting. This too would have been missed by PubMed. And here, since we have access to this article, I can show you what kind of information is present. So, by looking a little more closely at the abstract, we can see that this article actually focuses on the Japanese demographic, which is information that is oftentimes hard to get. This table was found in the article which lists drugs that reported cases of hepatotoxicity in 2008. And as you can see, our carbos is linked to several of these cases. In addition, you can see that there is mention of numerous other drugs in this table. Which one of these drugs are approved for the treatment of diabetes in the United States and Europe? So, to answer that question, we can go into PharmaPendium and look up the list of anti-diabetic drugs and then cross-reference that list to the one in the table. Now, this list is too long, so you cannot see it in one view. But going through the list, we can actually identify additional drugs in the table. In fact, we see 2 more drugs identified. So where do you go from here? Well, you can actually go back into PharmaPendium and now do a comparative adverse event search and see which drug has a better safety profile, and then from there, try to figure out why. So let's go back into PharmaPendium. And it is very easy. All we have to do is click on the Safety Data Search tab as indicated by the yellow arrow, and we will get to this Safety Data Search form that you're seeing right now. All we have to do is just click on the Add Drugs and Drug Classes link to add the drug that we want to compare. So once we do that, on the left-hand side, you will see this Browse Drug tab, which will appear from which we can actually find the drugs we want to pick out. All we have to do is simply click the Add button, and they will be added to the list, which is displayed over here. And then you just click on the Search Now button. And you will see over 1,700 lines of extracted adverse event and toxicity data available for you to compare the safety profiles of each drug, and even export so that you can do some more advanced analysis with your team. But till then, you can actually narrow down your results even further by clicking on the Show Filter tab and facilitate your comparative analysis a bit more. So in this case, when we're looking at our options of what to narrow our results down by, we can look at the Adverse Effects and Toxicity tab and actually narrow it down to hepatic and hepatobiliary disorders. Then all we have to do is click on the Apply Filters tab, and within minutes you can find extracted comparative adverse event data like what you can see over here. Not only can you get comparative data between drugs, but also across species, which is really valuable when you're trying to see how to best design your clinical trial and preclinical studies to avoid seeing adverse events such as these. And by gaining visibility into the dosing used for studies that show these adverse events, you can then use this information to design better studies which can save an incredible amount of time and money. Now, if we just go back to where we were before, where we had selected hepatobiliary disorders, we can actually select for transaminases. So all we have to do is click on the liver function analysis selection and then click Apply Filters. Now last time we had restricted the transaminase search to just the FDA labels, but here when we search the whole document, you can see how valuable it is to be able to see at what doses you start to observe elevated aminotransferase events. Now here we see a lot of data that's related to human studies, but you can actually go back in the Show Filters tab and click on Species and narrow it down to vertebrates so that you can see what kind of preclinical studies were done and whether the adverse events or observations you're seeing actually translate into the clinic. And now you can see what were the preclinical studies that observed this event and understand what were the warning signs that these observations were going to translate to the clinic. Again, very critical data that is oftentimes very hard to find, and very hard to find in this type of view. So in summary, we found post-marketing adverse event reporting in the Japanese demographic. We found drugs within the anti-diabetic drug class which demonstrated similar adverse events in the Japanese demographic, and were then able to do comparative adverse event analysis on those drugs. We also found extracted drug safety data in both preclinical and clinical studies across different drug classes. So now we're going to be talking about our third example. At this point, Amo, are there any other questions?
Yes, Pooja, thank you for the information so far. Yes, really interesting to see how you can find those hard to spot signals in Embase and then go into PharmaPendium to drill down into specific information. And from our audience, there was a little bit of confusion at the beginning with Embase, which I clarified, but might be good to clarify with the rest of the audience as well, with regards to full text searching. So Embase is searching title, abstract, and index fields, but the indexing is done in the full text. And I think, Pooja, that's what you were referring to when you mentioned full text. So those index terms are indeed pulled from the full text. So in effect, you pull those terms, you have the opportunity then to search for those terms in Embase.
Yes, and you can even pull those terms from even the tables, the data tables, any information that's present in the full text.
That's right. That's right. We have another question, Pooja, on how we offer Embase and PharmaPendium. Is it sold? Are they sold together?
They can be sold together. We don't. It really depends on sort of what you currently have, and if you're willing to buy both at the same time, or you're first willing to try them individually. You know, that's something that we can work out with our sales team, and definitely we can sell them together as a package.
Okay, okay. And that's all the questions we have just now. Hopefully we'll have some more at the end. So as I said at the beginning, do please send in your questions, and Pooja will make some time for the rest of your questions at the end. So keep sending them in.
Okay, great. Thanks, Emil. Perfect. So let's get back to our Acarbose example. So let's go to our third example, which is looking at adverse events, which we can find in Embase, which were not reported in the labeling. And then we want to go back in PharmaPendium and ask, could we have known about these adverse events before the label was even updated? So, as an example, let's picture a scenario where we are a scientist and we are trying to monitor marketing adverse events for our Acarbose because we are developing a drug in the same drug class, and we want to know if there has been any major adverse events since the last approved label, which in this case would be theoretically, let's say in 2008. We're going to pretend like we're a scientist maybe in the year 2010. So this is where Embase can help you give access to studies that have published additional clinical trials related to this topic. So as an example, here is an article that is called Medical Management of Metabolic Dysfunction in PCOS. And this is something that we found in our 194 article list. And we focus on this paragraph. It actually mentions how Acarbose was able to induce potentially fatal hepatotoxicity. And if we go back in the, let's say, the 2008 label, there is nothing mentioned here about any fatal reactions to this drug. So something we can do actually is we can go in PharmaPendium, and we can actually, when we look up our Acarbose, we can actually go to this Acarbose drug page. Every drug has this drug page where we can get information that can link us directly to the FDA approval package, any pharmacokinetic data, and then any adverse effect and toxicity data. So since we're interested at post-marketing events, we can directly click on the post-marketing reports tab, which is in orange, and see what we can find. So as you can see, we can see all of the adverse event reporting over here. Once again, by clicking on the Show Filter tab, we can narrow down the search since we have over 1,000 reports present. So it's very similar. The Show Filter tab is very similar to the other examples we had before. We can actually go into adverse effects and toxicity and find hepatic failures. And we can click on that and see what kind of information we can find. So as you see over here, when we click on hepatic failures, we actually have 17 reports related to our Acarbose. And when we click on these reports, this is what you will see. You will see the errors report number, the adverse events reported in that report, what the outcomes were, the date, the gender of the subject, the age, and really interesting is actually also the panel which shows other administered drugs. So maybe you can see, is there a theme of, in a case where there's death, that there was actually another drug that was administered to the patient. So that way you can figure out, is it solely due to acarbose or could it be due to some drug-drug interaction? So again, very interesting insights that you can find. And also, as you can see, many of the adverse reports actually led to death. So there is fatal outcome that has been reported, and this is something that you could have searched for before in PharmaPendium to see what you could possibly expect in the post-marketing studies done after the drug is approved. So when looking at the 2008 label, again, we don't see anything fatal, but you will see that in the 2011 label, it does come up as acarbose having hepatitis with fatal outcome. And this is something that you could have been aware of much earlier than 2011 itself. So in summary, we found post-marketing adverse event reporting. We found post-marketing adverse event reporting in the Japanese demographics, so this is a summary from before. But now with this example, we were actually able to find adverse events not yet reported on the label as well. So this is all pertaining to that third example that we're talking about. So again, very, very interesting insights and really nice way to kind of monitor drugs which are currently on the market and going back and seeing what were those studies and were there warning signs. And I now monitor other drugs and look at their FDA approval packages and see what kind of warning signs I might expect in clinical studies, or even what kind of events I might expect to see post-market. So now this brings us to our last example. So what we're going to do is kind of address the topic now of patient compliance. Were there any adverse events reported to affect patient compliance in Embase? And then we can ask the question, did we actually find evidence of this in the approval package? And then how do we mitigate risk moving forward? So here I have a lot of articles which I got from that 194 query list that we talked about before. And in the boxes you'll see mention of how patients actually discontinued the treatment with acarbose due to adverse events. So in the first article on the top left-hand side, it says, indeed, there was a high dropout rate attributed to gastrointestinal effects, raising concerns about the usefulness of acarbose in clinical practice. The one on the top right actually says, furthermore, the frequent occurrence of side effects such as bloating, flatulence, and diarrhea hinder patient compliance. This is in relation to acarbose. And then in the bottom one, it actually says its use in kidney transplant recipients is also likely to be prohibited as its concomitant use with misophenolate mofetil could trigger gastrointestinal upset. So there we're seeing, in a scenario where you need to have a combination drug therapy, how it may not be ideal to use acarbose. So we see all of this in studies post-market, but was there any evidence of lack of patient compliance pre-drug approval? And this is information that would be really useful to know so that you can anticipate these kinds of events moving forward. And particularly if your drug belongs to the same drug class or targets the same target, this is information that you would want to know to see if there's anything that you should expect when you're designing your preclinical studies or clinical trials. So now, in fact, if you look in PharmaPendium, you can see studies which were done. So here what I basically did was I went into the acarbose FDA approval package and I just typed discontinuation just to see if that word pops up as patients discontinuing a particular treatment. I have asked before, can I type in the word withdrawal? And yes, you can, and you will find data in the acarbose FDA approval package that talks about patients withdrawing from the treatment regimen. So in this case, I just used discontinuation. And what's nice about the search tool is that you can just play around with words and really pick up interesting information. So looking at this, basically what you can see at the bottom is what's in the red box. Basically says there was a significantly greater rate of discontinuation due to adverse events in the acarbose group as compared to placebo. The primary events leading to discontinuation in the acarbose group were flatulence and, to a lesser degree, diarrhea and pain. So there was evidence of this before the drug was approved, and this is very interesting to know, especially if, let's say, you have a therapy and you're thinking of combining acarbose with it. That is something really important to know, that patients might actually drop out. So again, this is the kind of information that's very easy to find in PharmaPendium and can save you a lot of time and money down the road. So in summary, for this example, we found evidence that patient compliance was an issue with acarbose due to its adverse events. These concerns were clearly expressed in the approval package and should have been further considered before launching the drug on the market. And now, if you're facing a similar adverse events in your clinical trials, what information can you find that can help you mediate that risk of patients withdrawing from your drug? So here we'll kind of actually talk about a second example related to patient compliance. We can actually see a suggestion in the FDA approval package which can help someone decide how to mediate that risk of patients withdrawing from a particular treatment. And I'll explain further as we go through the example. So here again, you can see that query where we have the 194 results. And on the left-hand side, I've opened up the drug filter tab. And you can see sort of the most frequent drugs listed in your search query list. So the top one is, of course, acarbose, because that's what we have actually put one of our search terms. Right underneath that, you will see another drug, metformin. And so sometimes when you have two drugs which are so frequently mentioned, it could be that they are so frequently mentioned in your search result because they are actually being considered for a combination therapy. So let's try and go to the advanced search bar in Embase. We can type in acarbose and metformin and see what we can find. So here, we can actually see a result from an article, number 8, and I can let you read the title, but more interestingly is what's underlined in red at the bottom of the abstract, which says the fixed-dose combination of acarbose and metformin was well tolerated, and it was superior to metformin monotherapy alone. So that's really interesting to see, especially if you're looking at acarbose for therapy. That's a big plus for acarbose. However, a combinatorial drug therapy of acarbose and metformin is not approved yet by the FDA or EMEA. But was this ever tested before? Can we actually find studies in the FDA approval package, for example, that actually tested acarbose and metformin together? And actually, indeed, we can. So here again, what I'm basically showing you is the acarbose FDA approval package, where here I actually typed in dosing concerns as a way to find anything that could be of concern in terms of doses. If I had typed in acarbose and metformin, I would have also gotten to this page because both of those words are there. But here you'll actually see a study that had been performed. I'll read what's in the red box. It says acarbose was approved in late 1995 for treatment of type 2 diabetes, both as monotherapy and in combination with sulfonylureas. The sponsor has submitted amendments requesting approval for use in combination with metformin and in combination with insulin. However, approval of these indications was not granted. So here and then they actually go and sort of describe the study, and you can read that more and see why that was the case. You can see that this study was performed in Canada, and they actually say, where you see the underlined sentences, that there was an inadequate amount of data, particularly since both acarbose and metformin caused gastrointestinal adverse events, which could possibly be potentiated when the drugs are used in combination. So one of the reasons why it wasn't improved was in fact because metformin also caused the same adverse events that acarbose did. You can also find another study that was actually done in the United States, And if you scroll down that study, what you see in the underlined sentences, it says, in any event, the division's concern that the addition of acarbose to metformin might lead to an unacceptably high rate of gastrointestinal complaints has not been borne out. But this is something that was considered. So where do you go from here? Well, if you scroll down even further, this is one of the more interesting insights that you can find. You probably have to read more of the paragraph, but it says here, this seems to suggest the possibility that patients already on metformin are accustomed to gastrointestinal symptoms, so that the addition of acarbose does not matter. Alternatively, tolerability to metformin pre-selects patients who will also be tolerant to acarbose. In any event, the division's concerned that the addition of acarbose to metformin might lead to an unacceptably high rate of gastrointestinal complaints has not been borne out. So essentially, if there is a major concern that combining acarbose to metformin might lead to a very high rate of gastrointestinal adverse events, what you can do now is pre-select and narrow down your patient selection. So you can first find patients who are on metformin and who do not have severe gastrointestinal adverse events, and use those to treat acarbose with. So that's an idea that then you can take away for your own drug that you're developing that may be similar to acarbose in terms of its drug safety profile. So again, some very interesting insights that you can find over there. So in summary, we found evidence of acarbose plus metformin combination therapy in recent clinical studies. However, the same combination has been considered by the FDA before. We gained insight into the risk factors of combining therapies where both drugs have similar adverse events. And we found a possible way of mitigating that risk of patient withdrawal if that type of combination therapy were to be explored again. So overall, as you can see with this one drug example, how useful and critical it is to have Embase and PharmaPendium together in order to get that comprehensive view of drug safety from preclinical and clinical studies to post-marketing reports. I really encourage you to let us know if you would like to be contacted to receive further information on these products to see how we can best serve your needs. And with that said, I really would like to thank all of you for attending this webinar. And now I know we're a bit short on time, but if there's a few questions left, then I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, we have quite a few questions that came in, Pooja. We have a couple of minutes. We have, so we did have an interesting question, but I think good to go into more detail with that person afterwards on looking at the presentation, which is the best to use for adverse events in medical information. We can certainly look at that a little bit later on. But we've also got, is it possible to easily find articles for interaction of a class or molecules with another class?
Yes. That just depends on how you do your search query. Again, if you have particular drugs in mind, you can search for those particular drugs. At the moment in Embase, we do not have a way to search for drug class, so you would have to know the specific drug that you have in mind. However, in PharmaPendium, you can search by drug class. So if you want to find all of the information that's out there in the approval packages for anti-diabetic agents, you can do that. And then you can compare
you could search for drug class in Embase as well, though, right? Using the entry higher term, so the drug class entry term.
Sure. I mean, if you want to search anti-diabetic agents in the search term and then choose another, like antihypertensive agents, for example, you can choose those two search terms, put them in the search bar, and then do a search that way.
Sure. Yeah.
It's just you won't have a list of all the classes in the filters like you would, for example, in PharmaPendium. But that's something that we can explore.
Indeed. Indeed. We have a question on printing the FDA approval package, so we'll make sure that we send you some information on that. In the other drugs administered column, are these product names or generic chemical names?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
In the other drugs administered column, are those product names or generic chemical names?
We do have, I think, the names there, the generic chemical names as well. I can double check that with that person just to be sure.
Yeah. And we had some links to the slides. So important to let you know that Pooja's presentation will be sent to you. So we use SlideShare, so we'll put the slides there and make sure that you get the link. We will look at all of your questions, and we have just run out of time, but some excellent questions there. Thank you for putting those to Pooja. And Pooja and I will make sure that we follow up, and if you require specific follow-up, as Pooja said, then we'll make sure that we do that. And could you just quickly move to the last slide, Pooja? Yeah. So please do send us any other questions you can send it to BD Training, but also reply to the mail that we will send you as a follow-up. And I've given the webinar pages here as well, so you can check out any upcoming Embase or PharmaPendium webinars, and also you can review webinars that we have given in the past. We have given webinars since the beginning of this year, and on quite a lot of different subject matters related to Embase and to PharmaPendium. So that is all we have time for. Thank you again for joining. Thank you, Pooja, for your excellent information. And we hope to meet all of you again at another occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.